Hey little dreamers! Ready for a magical bedtime adventure? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a sleepy tale. Let's go! In a village stitched between the folds of a quiet, misty valley, where houses leaned like tired old storytellers and roofs wore moss like blankets, lived a girl who owned not even a single flame. Her name was Alira, and she was the candle maker's daughter. By day, she helped her father twist wicks, pour wax, and trim burnt edges from old candle stubs. The workshop always smelled of honey and smoke, and the shelves groaned with jars of wax, ivory, gold, even deep forest green. But when night fell, and the world softened into shadows, Alira's room stayed dark. She never kept a candle for herself, not even the tiniest one. Their home, tucked at the edge of the village near the woods, glowed faintly from the shopfront. But Alira's attic room flickered with nothing but starlight and moon breath through a crooked windowpane. She would sit on her bed, knees tucked under her chin, listening to the wind sigh through the wooden beams. Sometimes it sounded like the forest whispering stories she was too sleepy to hear. She didn't mind the dark. Not really. It was gentle, familiar. But sometimes on the coldest nights, when the wind whistled too sharply or the silence felt too big, she'd wonder what it might feel like to fall asleep to the flicker of a flame, soft and golden, dancing like it had secrets. Still, when her father set aside a few stubby candles too small to sell, she didn't hoard them. She wrapped them in scrap cloth and tucked them into her satchel, for someone who might need a little light more than she did. Each evening, just as the sun melted into the hills and the village rooftops turned to silhouettes, Alira would slip out the back door of her father's shop. In her satchel, 3, maybe 4 stubby little candles, short as a thumb and soft around the edges. Most were crooked, some bent in half. A few still smelled of lavender or beeswax, but many were just plain, pale, and humble. She didn't wait for thanks. She didn't ask for names. She simply watched for people whose eyes held the kind of tired that no sleep could fix. A grandmother sitting alone by her doorstep, staring at a teacup gone cold. A shepherd's son who had lost his way after dusk and was too proud to cry. The baker, who still worked with flour on his face long after the village had gone to bed. To each, she offered a candle with both hands, carefully as if it were treasure. And something curious always happened. The person's shoulders would relax just a little. Their voice would soften. The night air, once heavy with worry or weariness, would lighten. One traveler, a wiry man with a weather-worn cloak, laughed when she handed him a candle no bigger than a spool of thread. But later that night, as he sat beneath an oak, trying to keep warm with a sputtering torch, it was Alira's little candle that stayed lit, flickering calmly even as the wind danced around it. Alira never bragged, never questioned. She simply walked home with her empty satchel and cold hands, thinking of nothing but the way a little light could change a whole evening. Even her father noticed once. "You give them all away?" he asked gently. Alira nodded. They needed them. The candles Alira gave away weren't the ones customers chose. No one came to the shop asking for the stubby ends, the lopsided molds, or the ones with bubbles that made the wax dip and lean like wilted flowers. These were the ones left behind in wooden crates, forgotten after the neat, perfect ones were wrapped and sold in brown paper. Her father, with his weathered hands and soot-lined nails, would sigh as he set them aside. "Can't sell these, not even for a copper," he'd mutter, wiping his palms on his apron. But Alira saw them differently. To her, each odd little candle held a quiet charm. One curled like a question mark. Another leaned like it had something important to whisper. They were imperfect, yes, but soft in the hand, smooth like a river stone, and most importantly, still capable of light. She believed that was enough. In her satchel, the misfits took on new purpose. They were not meant for markets or coins. They were meant for moments. A single stub pressed into the palm of a lonely fisherman. A bent wax curl left on the windowsill of a sick child. Each found a home not through gold or barter, but through the silent rhythm of kindness. And somehow they burned better than they should have. No one could explain it. The crooked ones lasted all night. The soft, half-melted stubs gave off a warmer hue than the tall, polished ones sold in town. And people began to notice. They didn't know Alira's name, but they whispered about the kindling girl, the one who brought small flames when hope burned low. She never stayed long enough to hear the whispers. She just kept walking, tucking her satchel close and watching the twilight for someone who looked like they needed a flicker. It was on one particularly foggy evening, one where the mist clung low to the cobblestones like spilled milk, that Alira noticed something odd in the alley behind the baker's shop. Sound. Sniffle. Not quite crying but not silence either. She stepped closer, clutching the edge of her satchel, and saw him. A little boy no older than 6 or 7, curled up beneath a broken cartwheel. His coat was too thin. His shoes, if you could call them that, were wrapped in cloth and tied with twine. His eyes were wide with that particular kind of fear that comes when the world forgets you. He looked up at her as if she might vanish if he blinked. Without a word, Alira reached into her satchel and pulled out a candle, a squat, chubby one with a wick off center and a faint smell of honey. She struck a match and cupped the flame with both hands, shielding it from the damp air, then passed it to him as if it were something sacred. The moment it lit, the alley changed. The fog softened. The shadows backed away just a step. The boy's shivering slowed. He stared at the little light, mesmerized, as if it were telling him that someone still saw him, someone still cared. Alira sat beside him on the stone. They didn't speak. She simply stayed until the candle's light reflected in his eyes. Later, a merchant would say he passed by that alley and swore the fog parted in a perfect circle, just wide enough for a child and a girl to sit quietly beside a flame. And when Alira finally stood to leave, the boy whispered one word. Thanks. Not for the candle, not even for the warmth, but for not walking past. A few nights later, as twilight yawned over the hills and the first crickets began their lullaby, Alira wandered near the village crossroads, where travelers came and went with dusty boots and tails in their satchels. There, leaning against the milestone post, was a merchant. His cloak was velvet trimmed. His boots shined despite the mud, and around his waist swung a fine brass lantern. He was muttering under his breath, flicking flint again and again. The lantern, though handsome, refused to catch. Its glass was clean, its oil full, but the wick remained cold and still. Lyra watched quietly. When he noticed her, he chuckled, half annoyed. Fancy lantern, useless in wind like this. Can't get it to light, can't see the road ahead. Wouldn't do to stumble into a ditch with silk in my pack, eh? Alira didn't smile. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out a tiny candle, no more than 2 fingers tall, shaped like a teardrop. She didn't speak. She just offered it with both hands, the flame already lit and steady despite the breeze. The merchant raised an eyebrow, amused. That won't last me an hour. But she was already turning to leave. Later that night, long after even the tavern had dimmed its fires, the merchant sat beneath a birch tree on the road's edge, the candle still glowing beside him on a flat stone. The wind had howled. The lantern had shattered in frustration. Yet the little stub, Alira's gift, burned on warm and defiant. When dawn finally cracked across the sky, painting the hills gold, he whispered into the wind, as if to someone not quite there. I'll never laugh at a small light again. And far off, in her room of quiet shadows, Elira dreamt of trees glowing like stars. In the heart of the village stood an old stone fountain, dry for years, with ivy climbing its cracked edges and a basin that held only leaves and dust. Children once played there, tossing in pebbles as if they were wishes. But now most people walked past without even glancing, except for one man. Elira first noticed him just after dusk, seated on the fountain's edge, shoulders hunched beneath a threadbare cloak. He didn't beg. He didn't speak. He simply stared into the basin like it might remember how to hold water. His eyes looked hollow, like they'd forgotten how to reflect light. He paused at a distance. Something about him felt heavy, not dangerous, but sorrowful in a way that made the air feel colder. Quietly she approached. She knelt and placed a single candle on the edge of the fountain near his hand. This one was barely wax, made from old drippings, uneven and strange, shaped more like a twisted root than a candle. Yet when she struck the match and lit it, the flame rose tall and clear. The man didn't look at her, but he whispered hoarse. "Why?" Elira simply said, "Because it's dark." For a long time neither moved. Then the wind changed. It stirred the leaves in the basin, lifting them gently into a spiral that shimmered like ash and gold. The air hummed, not loud, not music, but something close. The man looked up, his eyes glinting now with tears. When Elira turned to go, she thought she saw the basin ripple, not with water but with memory. A shimmer of light in a place long forgotten by warmth. She didn't speak of it to anyone. But that night, for the first time in months, the moonlight felt kinder. The village had always known shadows, but they were familiar ones, the kind that curled beneath porches or stretched lazily at twilight. But now, the shadows felt different. They lingered longer, deeper, and moved when they shouldn't. Began with small things. Lanterns that wouldn't light. Hearth fires that sputtered for no reason. Even the sun seemed reluctant to rise some mornings, its light paler, weaker, as if it too were tired. Birds stopped singing before dusk. Dogs refused to bark after nightfall. And though no storm came, the wind whispered warnings through the shutters. People noticed, but no one spoke of it loudly. They wrapped themselves tighter in blankets and lit more candles, though even the best ones gave off a nervous flicker. Some said the darkness was just early winter. Others muttered about curses, spirits, omens. The blacksmith claimed he saw his own shadow lean the wrong way once. The baker's oven refused to stay hot after sunset. And through it all, Elira continued walking the streets with her satchel of forgotten candles. If anything, she moved faster, lighting stoops, windowsills, doorways with her stubby offerings. Each one burned steady, casting halos in places where even polished lanterns failed. Children began waiting for her at their doors. Old women clutched the candles like charms. No one asked why they worked. They only knew that they did. Her father grew quiet, watching the growing unease settle across the town. "Elira," he said one evening, "I think something's coming." She nodded. She had felt it too. A stillness beneath the ground. A hush that wasn't just silence, but holding its breath. And in the darkest corners of the village, where no torch dared linger, there was a whisper. Name. The girl with the light. Far beyond the village, where hills gave way to high walls and watchtowers, stood the royal city. Its spires once caught the morning sun like blades of light. But even there, especially there, the darkness had arrived. In the palace, chandeliers of crystal and gold no longer dazzled. Their hundreds of candles, once symbols of wealth and warmth, now fought to stay alive. Flames leaned sideways as if pushed by invisible hands. Some went out entirely, snuffed by nothing at all. Servants murmured as they relit torches again and again, only to watch them fade. The queen, regal and graceful, sat upon her velvet throne wrapped in a silver cloak. Her face remained composed, but her hands trembled as she lit a candle each evening, always the same one, short and strange, gifted anonymously by a messenger months ago. Unlike the others, this candle never faltered. She kept it beside her always, watching the flame like it might whisper secrets. The court called it superstition. The royal advisors offered logic, schemes, distractions. But none dared deny what they all felt, that something ancient was waking. Something buried, older than the crown, deeper than the dungeons below. At night, dreams twisted strangely. People awoke remembering tunnels that didn't exist, or voices calling from chimneys. The sky above the city dimmed even at noon. The sun passed overhead like a coin lost in deep water. The queen, alone in her chambers, stared at the little candle. Its flame burned soft gold, steady and unafraid. She whispered into it, not a prayer, not a plea, but a promise. If the fire comes for us, you must be ready. And far away in her quiet village, Elira stirred from sleep. Her room was still dark, but in her dream the wind had whispered its time. It began like any other morning. Roosters called. Wooden shutters creaked open. Pots clanged as fires were lit. But above all this, nothing. No color spilled over the sky. No golden warmth bled across rooftops. The horizon, usually aglow with pinks and honey light, remained ink black, like night had simply decided not to leave. First people waited. Surely the sun was just hidden behind thick clouds. Surely it would rise late. But the hours ticked on, and still the sky stayed dark. No stars, no moon, no sun. Just a heavy, motionless black pressing against the rooftops like a held breath. Candles were lit in every home, but they danced strangely, fluttering without breeze, burning faster than they should. Oil lamps dimmed. Hearts hissed. The town square, usually bustling by midday, sat silent and confused. But one thing stood out. The houses that had once received one of Elira's humble, misshapen candles still held light. A warm, steady light that didn't flicker, didn't waver. It pulsed gently behind shutters and spilled softly through cracks in wooden doors, casting halos onto the street. People gathered near those homes, wordlessly drawn to the glow. Some knocked and begged to come in. Others just sat outside, basking in the odd comfort of the flame's warmth. And in the center of it all, the candlemaker's shop glowed like a lighthouse. Elira stood inside the workshop, her satchel empty. Every candle she had was already out in the world, quietly keeping the dark at bay. Her father paced by the window, whispering, "The sun has forgotten us." Elira didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the sky, not with fear, but with a strange calm. Somewhere beyond the clouds, beyond even the stars, something had taken notice, and it was watching. That night, the chimneys whispered. It wasn't the usual hiss of smoke or the creak of settling rooftops. It was voices, soft, breathless murmurs that curled with the ash as it rose from fireplaces and scattered into the dark. They drifted down alleyways, slipped under doors, circled around lantern poles, and rustled through dried leaves like secrets looking for ears. Some heard their names spoken. Others heard lullabies they hadn't heard since childhood. A few heard nothing at all, but found soot-streaked words scrawled across their windows come morning. Asterisk, she lit the way. Find her, asterisk. It was Elira's name they meant, even if they didn't know it. The girl who gave away the candles. The one whose light stayed when nothing else did. In the candlemaker's shop, the ash curled into shapes, faint outlines of hands, faces, lanterns, eyes. Elira watched them unafraid. She held out her palm, and a curl of soot settled into it like a feather. It didn't smear. It shimmered faintly, then vanished. Her father had shuttered the windows, stacked wood by the door, and clutched the good candles as though guarding treasure. "Something's wrong with the world," he whispered. "It's turning inside out." Lyra only nodded. She had begun to feel it days ago, that the darkness wasn't just an absence, but a presence. Waiting. It wasn't here to swallow. It was here to test. And the whispers. They weren't threats. They were directions. All over the village, people began to follow the ash. Some saw trails on their steps. Others saw shapes in their hearts. But all paths, every soot-kissed whisper, pointed to one place. The flickering window of the candlemaker's home. And the girl who had never saved a flame for herself. By morning, the village marketplace, usually clinking and clattering with carts, brooms, and copper coins, stood utterly still. No merchants called out their wares. No footsteps echoed along the stone. Baskets of withered apples and half-sold bread loaves sat abandoned on overturned crates. The canvas awnings, so often puffed by the breeze, now sagged lifelessly, weighed down by air that felt thick and expectant. Even the birds had stopped coming. It wasn't silence in the usual way. It was listening silence, like the sky and stones and every shuttered house were waiting for something to happen. At the far end of the square, a single light glowed. The candlemaker's shop, with its creaky wooden door and wax-flecked windows, was the only place that flickered with warmth. Not bright, not loud, but there, solid, undeniable. People began to gather, not in crowds, but in pairs, trios, quiet families huddling together. Some carried lanterns that wouldn't light. Others clutched half-melted candles that dripped without flame. Their eyes were wide, not with panic, but wonder, confusion, and a strange, hopeful fear. Inside, Lyra stood at the counter, fingertips tracing the grooves in the wood. Her father was kneeling near the back, rummaging through boxes for more wick, more wax. Asterisk anything star. "They're coming," he said, peering through the shutters. "All of them." Lyra nodded. She didn't feel fear. She felt ready. Not because she had answers, but because her whole life she had prepared by giving away what little she had. And now, those gifts were glowing across the village like stars on earth. Tiny reminders in the darkness. Not loud, not proud, but steady. As she stepped outside, candlelight spilling around her like a cloak, the crowd parted. Not with applause but quiet reverence. Somewhere deep below the stone, something stirred. They began to glow brighter. Not the polished ones in chandeliers or the tall tapers in brass holders. Those continued to sputter and die. But the stubby ones, the crooked ones, the ones Lyra had pressed into waiting hands months ago, they shimmered like they were waking up. In windowsills, faint flames rose tall and still. On old wooden tables, wax that should have long melted stood proud, its glow steady and warm. In the hands of children who had once cried themselves to sleep, tiny lights now flickered with a gentle hum, like the candles were humming back. They were remembering. Each one seemed to pulse in rhythm, not with time, but with purpose. Lyra could feel it, like little heartbeats calling to her. From across the village, across miles of dark roads, each light whispered back, "We remember who gave us life." It was as though the flames were connecting, creating a map of warmth across the blackened world. Trail. All. A return. Lyra stepped into the street, and wherever her feet fell, the light grew stronger. A candle in an upstairs window brightened as she passed. Another flared from behind a cellar grate. From behind shutters, faces peeked out, bathed in golden warmth they hadn't seen in days. Her father stood on the stoop, mouth half open, eyes reflecting the glow. "They're answering you," he breathed. Elira looked down at her hands, which no longer trembled in the cold. They were warm, not from the air but from within. The candles weren't just remembering where they had gone. They were remembering why. Not for coin, not for trade, but for comfort, for kindness. And now that same kindness lit the path ahead. Path only she could walk. It arrived without sound. Not from the hills nor through the gates. It did not gallop or slither or soar. It simply appeared. One breath it wasn't there, the next it was. A figure of smoke and hush, tall as the rooftops, stood at the edge of the square. It wore no crown, no armor, no name. Its cloak billowed like night itself, stitched from ash and coal and something older than memory. Where its face should have been, there was only a blur, shifting, soft, unreadable. No one screamed. Even the children watched, silent, clutching glowing stubs of wax in their hands. It walked, slowly, weightlessly. Its steps not touching the ground but rippling it, as though the cobblestones were water. With every stride, torches dimmed. Gas lamps hissed and died. But the candles, the little ones Elira had made, they shone brighter. The shadows stopped in the center of the square. Heads bowed without being told to. The air grew dense like snow was about to fall, but no cold came. Only warmth, trembling slightly, clinging to Elira's skin. It turned toward her. No voice passed its lips, yet everyone heard it. A whisper in the bones. Question ancient and simple. Who gave the light? The villagers didn't answer. They didn't have to. Elira stepped forward. No fear in her limbs. No shaking breath. Her eyes locked with the shadow's emptiness, and her voice, though quiet, carried like a song remembered from childhood. "I did." The shadow tilted its head. Did not growl. Did not roar. It simply reached out one hand, not to strike, but to point, to gesture down a road that hadn't been there before. A trail of candlelight winding into the dark woods beyond. The road of her own giving. And the fire that waited. The path was not made of stone or dirt or roots. It was made of light. Little puddles of glow left by every candle Elira had ever given away. They floated just above the ground, flickering steadily like stepping stones in the dark. Elira took her first step, and the light beneath her foot grew brighter, welcoming. She glanced back once. Her father stood at the edge of the square, one hand pressed against his chest. The villagers watched in silence, some with tears glinting in the warm candlelight. None followed. This road was for her alone. With each step forward, the world behind her dimmed. Trees leaned in like they were listening. The woods whispered, not with threat but reverence. Moss-covered stones glowed faintly as she passed, kissed by the light of nearby flames. In the branches above, no wind stirred, yet leaves turned to watch. The forest had gone quiet, yes, but not empty. It was expectant. She passed familiar places. The fallen log where she once sat beside a wandering tinker. The hill where she gave a candle to a couple who had lost their way home. Each place now pulsed with soft memory. Each flame a thank you carved into the air. Soon, even the trees thinned, the earth sloping gently downward, and the trail of candlelight curved like a river into shadow. At the base of the slope stood an archway. Stone, ancient, overgrown, but alive with gold veins of flickering firelight. The final candle on the path stood at its center, taller than the rest, straight and proud despite its waxy tears. Elira paused before it, knowing instinctively. Beyond this point, the world changed. She reached out, touched the flame. It did not burn. It welcomed her in. Beyond the archway, The air thickened, velvety and warm, laced with the scent of smoke and sweetened ash. Elira stepped carefully, her shoes pressing onto stone that shimmered faintly with heat. She had entered a cavern, though it felt more like a heart, living, pulsing, ancient. The walls glowed with threads of molten gold, winding like veins through obsidian rock. Above her, the ceiling stretched into darkness, dotted with flickering points of emberlight, like stars trapped underground. The silence here was different, not empty but full of waiting. And then she saw it. At the very center of the cavern, curled like a lion in sleep, burned a fire so massive and still it looked carved from light itself. It had no clear form. Sometimes it seemed like wings, other times like a beast, then like a sleeping child. Flame folded over flame in rippling silence, yet it gave off no smoke. No heat stung her face. Instead, it radiated something deeper. Recognition. This was the source. The slumbering fire beneath the world. The one that hadn't burned in centuries. The one that no torch could summon, no ritual could command. It had waited for her. As Elira approached, the air trembled. Not with danger but with reverence. The fire unfurled slightly, just enough to reveal a space within. A hollow, glowing cradle of flame that shimmered without consuming. She stepped closer, unafraid. Behind her, the trail of candles still glowed at the mouth of the cavern, a ribbon of all her kindnesses leading here to this moment. And though the fire said nothing aloud, Elira felt its voice inside her chest. You gave what others hoarded. You lit others' paths, even in your own dark. And now the flame was ready to awaken with her. From the base of the fire's cradle, a staircase rose. Its steps made not of stone, but of suspended air lit by glowing embers. They shimmered red-orange, flickering like the last breath of coals, yet they held steady beneath the gaze of the flame. Elira stood before them, barefoot now. Her shoes had slipped away at the cavern's entrance, as though they knew they were not meant for what came next. The steps called to her. Each one pulsed gently, inviting, not demanding, not daring, simply asking. A quiet trial for a quiet heart. She lifted her foot and placed it on the first step. It was warm, not scorching but alive. The ember did not bite her skin. It hummed beneath her heel like a memory. The first candle she ever gave away, to a grieving seamstress with red-rimmed eyes. She took another step. With each footfall, a soft burst of light rippled outward. Visions stirred in the glow beneath her. Faces, moments, names she didn't know but had once touched with light. The child in the alley, smiling in sleep. The merchant beneath the tree, holding a melted stub like it was gold. The man at the fountain, whispering thanks into the wind. Higher she climbed, with no railing to steady her, only her breath and the pull in her chest that said, "Keep going." Below, the fire watched, not judging but witnessing. At the 15th step, the embers turned blue. The air thinned. Her body trembled, but not from fear, from something deeper. The weight of every kindness she had given, now rising with her. And when she reached the final step, there was nothing beneath her but flame, and nothing above her but silence. She stood, small and barefoot, before the heart of the fire. And it opened. When the fire opened, it did not blaze or roar. Breathe. A single long exhale of light and warmth that wrapped around Elira like a cloak made of memory. She closed her eyes, not from fear but instinct, and in that darkness behind her lids, visions bloomed. She saw 1,000 flames, each one a candle she had given. Not just the act of giving but what came after. The lost boy in the alley. His candle lit his way to the baker's back door, where a warm meal waited. The grieving man at the fountain. His candle stayed lit through the night, and by dawn, he had picked up his walking stick and journeyed home to forgive a long-forgotten brother. Even the merchant, once prideful and mocking, had tucked Alira's stub of wax into his pocket like a talisman, sharing its strange story with others across the land. Each scene shimmered in golden outlines, sketched in flame, glimpses of healing, reunion, rest. Tiny mercies sparked by crooked little candles too flawed to sell. Then deeper memories surfaced, her own. Alira as a child, sitting in the dark corner of the workshop, watching her father shape wax with quiet love. Her small hands learning to twist the wick. The first time she gave a candle away, not because she had many, but because someone else had none. The fire whispered, not in words but in feeling. This is what you've built. Not from wax but from kindness. Not from flame but from faith. The warmth grew not hotter but fuller like a rising sun. Alira opened her eyes and realized she wasn't standing before the fire anymore. She was within it. The light did not consume her. It welcomed her because she was already part of it. Always had been. The flame pulsed gently around Alira, like a heartbeat made of light. It cradled her, not with arms but with presence. She wasn't burning. She wasn't fading. She was becoming. In that perfect stillness, the fire finally spoke, not in sound but in her bones. I have waited. It wasn't angry. It wasn't mournful. It was calm, patient, like a mountain remembering its own name. Alira didn't ask what it meant. She understood. This fire, this ancient, endless warmth, had slumbered deep beneath the world, unreachable by kings, by spells, by scholars. Not because it was hidden, but because it was waiting for the right heart to find it. Not the strongest, not the cleverest, kindest. I'm not special, she whispered aloud, her voice lost in the golden glow. But the fire answered anyway. You gave what others feared to lose. Like, oh, self. Visions flickered across the cavern walls. Villages plunged in shadow, towers cold and empty. Cities where gold gleamed but hearts grew dim. In all those places, candles had been hoarded, guarded, locked in glass. Their light had been measured, rationed. But not hers. Her flame had been freely given, over and over, until there was nothing left but the memory of warmth, and that too she had shared. Now, the fire wrapped itself around her like a ribbon, not devouring, transforming. You are not here to take. You are here to become. And as the last ember kissed her forehead, something ancient shifted. A spark bloomed in her chest. Not a match, not a flicker, or a flame all her own. She was not the keeper of the fire. She was the fire, and she was ready to rise. Above the cavern, the world still slept beneath a sky that refused to shine. The sun was absent, the stars withheld. Shadows ruled the land, until the moment she stepped forward. Alira, no longer just a girl, no longer just a giver, rose from the heart of the flame. But she was not cloaked in fire. She was fire. Her hair shimmered like golden threads, her skin warm and radiant like candlelight under glass. Her eyes held embers that danced gently behind her gaze. She stepped from the glowing cradle, her bare feet touching stone that now bloomed with warmth beneath her. With every movement, the cavern awakened. Walls shimmered. The ceiling sparkled. The very air trembled as if holding its breath in reverence. She walked up the ember staircase, no longer testing it. Commanding it. Above ground, in the village square, people gasped. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of warmth. Not smoke, not wax, something older, truer. And then, not from the sky but from the earth, A column of golden fire burst upward from the woods beyond the village, spiraling like a ribbon, unfurling into the black sky above. It was not violent. It was graceful, as though light itself was stretching after a long, long sleep. The darkness didn't vanish with a scream. It bowed. It folded itself away like a heavy cloak being laid gently on a bed. The sky lightened. Shadows crept into corners and stayed there, no longer wandering. And at the center of it all stood Alira, her hands glowing, her breath soft. Her heart was the wick now, and her love, quiet, steady, unwavering, was the flame the world had been waiting for. The fire did not fade. Even when the sky brightened again, when the birds began to sing timidly in the trees and the frost melted from the rooftops, the glow did not vanish. It pulsed softly in the village square, in the heart of the candlemaker's shop, in the very air. Not as a blaze, but as a presence. A memory that shimmered in every window. And Alira, she was never seen again. Some say she became part of the fire itself, a spirit of warmth that lives in every home where a candle is lit with love. Others believe she still walks among us, barefoot and quiet, offering her light to those who've forgotten how to see it. But in the shop, her father kept the door open. He no longer made candles to sell, only to give away. And in the center of the window stood a single flame, a small, strange, misshapen candle that never melted, never flickered, never dimmed. Children pressed their noses to the glass to watch it glow. Old folks nodded gently as they passed. In time, others began giving away their candles too. Not perfect ones, not expensive ones, just enough light to get someone through the dark. And the story of the girl who gave everything without keeping a single flame for herself. It lived on in whispers and window panes, in foggy evenings and quiet acts of kindness. Because when the world forgets the sun, and the sky turns still, it only takes one small light, offered freely, humbly, to remind it how to shine again. So now, little one, let your eyes grow heavy. The candles have all been lit. The world outside has softened. No more footsteps on the cobblestones. No more whispering wind. Only the steady, gentle glow of a story well told. Alira's journey wasn't loud or grand. It wasn't full of battles or dragons. But oh, it mattered. Because sometimes the quietest kindness changes everything. Sometimes a girl with no flame can light the world. Think of her now, barefoot on ember steps, smiling with a heart full of warmth. She didn't wait to be powerful. She just gave. And through that giving, she became more than anyone expected. Close your eyes and picture that tiny candle, the one on your bedside table or the one in your heart. Let it flicker gently behind your dreams. You are safe. You are warm. And somewhere deep within, a little light is waiting to glow, just for you. Sleep now. The fire has found its keeper. And the darkness has gone to bed.